Hello everybody, it's Andy here, and today there's some crazy news, and that is Warpcoven have won a major tournament. Recently, last weekend, there was a big 100-player tournament in Spain, probably, that's where they all are, and Warpcoven managed to win it. This happened before the recent balance changes. Now, we have to ask ourselves why, how, etc. But first, let's all agree that when you saw that Warpcoven had won a major tournament, you had to click on that video, didn't you? Yes, you really did. How did they manage it? Well, pretend you're the lowest of the low in the kill team community. That's right, a competitive player that just takes the latest broken team until it gets nerfed. No, sorry, I meant a YouTuber. Pretend you're a YouTuber, right? You're trying to make a video. You're thinking, what gets those clicks? Replace Warpcoven with another faction. Does the community have to click on that video? Nobody's clicking on Chaos Cult's win tournament, right? But you see Warpcoven, you're like, well, hold on. They're the worst team. How do they do it? That's right, everybody. If you have to click on that video, that team needs a buff. Yes, that's right. Hello, welcome. This is actually a video in disguise. This is a balance changes that Kill Team needs video, however titled and thumbnailed as something just to prove a point. Warpcoven didn't win a tournament. That was a lie. I'm proving a concept. Yep. Yep. Anyway, Warpcoven is obvious. Wouldn't you agree? We all agree that Warpcoven, if they were to win a major tournament, you'd have to figure that out. You have to know how they do that because you know that can't be done, right? Let's think about some other factions that might also elicit a similar response. Worm Cult is possible. I don't think Worm Cult have won anything for a very long time. Certainly not in Into the Dark, right? Anything Compendium is an auto-click, but obviously GW has kind of accepted that Compendium's dead, so we won't really talk about them. We accept they're not going to get buffs. Exaction Squad seem to be kind of the worst, almost. Hearthkin, I would never expect to see Hearthkin. If I were to see Hearthkin win major tournament, I'm like, well, hold on. I need to know how, right? If I'm honest though, that's probably it for things that are like, everyone must click to see what happened and how it occurred. So, likewise, I would say also, if the title makes you think, well, yeah, of course they did. Why did the YouTuber title it like this is a thing? For example, Chaos Cults or Felgor Ravagers. If you say it like, oh my God, can you believe Felgor Ravagers won a tournament? Everybody's like, well, yeah, of course, yeah. I know they're the Felgor Ravagers, right? If it's something in the middle, you know, like, I don't know, Hyrotech Circle, I wouldn't expect to see it, but I also know that Hyrotech Circle, who happen to be these models right here, are a pretty good faction. It's like, yeah, okay, I get that. All that happened there is one of the top players decided to run Hyrotech Circle. Like, that's not a surprise, that's understandable. However, I would say that those that are in that level of, yeah, why do you title it that, would probably be Intercession, Legionary, Gelapox, Void Dancers, Felgor, Chaos Cults, and Pathfinders. All of those factions, I'm like, yeah, and? So, with that said, I'm now going to go over all of those factions that I just said are in the bottom, and then in the top, and say how we should possibly buff or nerf them. But of course, before we do that, I would like to say that if you are a subscriber to my channel, I'd like to give you a big double hello. Wow, wasn't that wholesome? And that may be wholesomeness provided to you in the form of a pleasantry given to you twice. That's right, it's the vaunted double hello. Honestly, thank you so much for watching the video. I just thought this would be an interesting idea as I'm slowly getting back into the excitement of playing Kill Team as a game. I needed a few months off, so thanks for bearing with me. And if you're back here watching this, thank you so much. If you like what I do, consider checking out my Patreon and supporting me that way. That'd be really awesome. Let's get into it. So, we need to talk first about the Exaction Squad, because I think this is one of the most interesting teams to discuss. The Exaction Squad are the reason that while I've been thinking about how to buff or nerf teams, I'm currently so focused on adding ploys to the teams instead of stat buffs. For example, if you buff the Exaction's raw stats, as they just did, they just got 8 wounds, right? And they just got like 5 up on a few guns and that sort of thing. That just means you're buffing Inquisitorial Agents, because Inquisitorial Agents are a stronger team than Exaction Squad. If you then buff the Exaction Squad, all that you're doing is saying, oh, okay, now I might take them with Inquisitorial Agents. You're not yet thinking that dropping those 7 models, or 5 models, whatever it is, 6, and then taking Exaction Squad is better than just putting Inquisitorial Agents into your team, essentially. So you can only buff them with things that Inquisitorial Agents cannot benefit from, which is strats, so ploys, equipment, and their core ability. Anything else is just going to imbalance the game further with Inquisitorial Agents. The only real talk I've heard about the buff for Exaction Squad at the moment, this week, was that, it happened earlier this week, is that they are now possibly viable as a pick for Inquisitorial Agents. Not that the team is viable, that's kind of unacceptable. Again, a lot of what they got was good. They needed to have 8 wounds. I think we can all agree that so far in the game, if one thing has proven true, it's that a 10 model regular human team does not work with 7 wounds. They are all having to get buffed to 8 wounds, apart from Novitiates, but that's because Novitiates are able to switch off shooting and manipulate dice. If we know anything from our current interest in 40k, it's that being able to manipulate dice and like force not rerolls, well, rerolls are amazing, but force successes, that's better than anything else, right? So that's the buff to 8 wounds was mandatory, but also frankly required from the current level of kill team as we see it. So what do you do with them? I don't know. Buff the stuff I just said you can buff. Yeah, there you go. I haven't actually in my little script here, my notes, given a way to fix them. I more just wanted to talk about the fact that you cannot just buff their stats. You can't just give everyone AP1 guns, for example, because that just means Inquisitorial Agents get AP1 guns. And I would add, this is probably a separate chat. Inquisitorial Agents, I imagine right now, are in a bit of a, let's call it the Chownath paradigm. I coined it right now, lads. This is the Chownath paradigm, which is where you get 2 really strong teams. Novitiates, really strong, dominated the game for a long time. Pathfinders, really strong, dominated the game for a long time. But because Pathfinders were that little bit stronger, when Chownath dropped, everybody said Pathfinders are broken, and nobody paid attention to Novitiates. They were both incredibly strong teams that both needed to be nerfed. I imagine we're in a very similar situation with Ashes of Faith, where actually Chaos Cults are outrageous. Inquisitorial Agents are really, really, really strong. Probably need a nerf. But because all the chat is focused on the really easy to play, kind of, I don't want to say dumb, that's not fair, but simple. You know, simple strat team of Chaos Cults, where everything you do is very straightforward. Nobody's really talking about how truly strong and potentially broken Inquisitorial Agents actually are. There you go. So anyway, let's talk about the Warpcoven, because obviously that's what I clickbaited you in here with. It wasn't clickbait, it was proof of concept. I apologise. So I think Warpcoven, they've been hanging around, they've had to be buffed throughout the entire, they were the 3rd team released. No, I've lied. They were the 4th team released. Hunterclade was 3rd. And we got Warpcoven before we got Chownath. So they were the 4th team. Is that it? Yeah, let's just say that's true. They might have come after Chownath. And they've just had to receive buff after buff, but they're coming very slowly. And I wonder why. I don't really know what's going on there, to be honest. It's a very low pick faction. People don't really care about Warpcoven, so there's not much vocality about it. That's not a word. Yeah. Anyway, how do we continue to bring them in line? The recent buffs were good changes, liked them all. However, I think we could go a step further. +1 health across the board. Yep, just needed. Like, they already have some built-in minor damage reduction, but it's very specific damage reduction, and in Kill Team, you don't care about that damage. If you're playing Warpcoven, even if you didn't have that All Is Dust ability that lowers damage, does whatever it does, like nobody's ever had to use this ability because nobody does it. And you get shot by a las gun, you're like, oh, okay, that was weird of you to shoot me with that. Why do you waste your action? What? So if you get shot by a melter or a plasma, that's when you want your damage reduction to save you. But that's not what All Is Dust does. So I would argue either you're needing that +1 health, or you have to change All Is Dust into some sort of generic damage reduction. Genuinely, All Is Dust, to be in line with everything else that exists in the game, should be a -1 to damage. Maybe if you really want to buff it, -1 to normal damage, -2 to critical damage, to a minimum of 3. I think that'd be fine. But only on the rubrics, not on the sorcerers. That way you've got some tough dudes and some weaker dudes that, like you've got your offense and defense. I think that'd be quite interesting. Also, you could look at a strat that it gives them extra movement. You can get super weird with it. Like, this is Zinch. Do something funky. It doesn't have to be teleport forwards. You've already got that as a psychic power. I'd argue something a bit more tricksery. Tricksery? Yeah, sure. I would say 2 CP, so it's big. In fact, you can't make it 2 CP. It has to be 1 CP, because actually Warpcoven are really dependent on their CP. If you made it 2 CP, nobody would ever use it unless it's outrageously strong. So 1 CP, and then make it a bit weird. Don't just make it move somebody forwards. Make it every operative on the map can swap places on your team, you know? So let's say you've just had somebody charge your rubric and your rubric managed to survive. Your turn, strat ploy, tack. It should be a strat ploy, shouldn't it? It shouldn't be attack. 1 CP, you can then swap all 6 of your operatives with somewhere else, right? Oh. Also, I'm obviously just assuming that you will only ever be running rubrics and sorcerers. Why would you run Zangles? Especially now that rubrics have been buffed in melee, which is great. Yeah, they're not good in melee, but they're buffed, which is nice. We then go to the Worm Cult. This is a real tough one, because in open, I think they're fine. I think they're really good in open. They now have hard counters. Like they're never beating Felgor and Colts at the moment, but those are the 2 broken teams. Nothing's beating them, right? However, in Into the Dark, they're terrible, and of course we are now moving out of the Into the Dark season, but we're still going to be playing Into the Dark. A lot of the big TOs, especially in Spain, Poland, etc., have said, and London, they've said, yep, we're going to continue to run mixed tournaments. So Into the Dark will still exist. And if you're Worm Cult, you don't win on Into the Dark. So you want a strat, and again, this is my concept of moving away from buffing datasheets and giving people more strats, to make them only better in Into the Dark. How do you do that? Like, what is that strat? Obviously, the benefit of Worm Cult is that you have Cult Ambush. Cult Ambush means literally nothing on Into the Dark, so you've removed that entirely from the team, essentially. You also generally, they have some other fancy things where you can like shine spotlights, and that also doesn't matter in Into the Dark, so you've just kind of cut the team in half, or in quarter, and not given them anything in return on Into the Dark. You could argue, in a sense, in a similar way as you've done that to Pathfinders. Except Pathfinders was so strong on open, nobody cares. We're like, okay, good. We've managed to nerf Pathfinders by making them not playable on 50% of the games we play because of Into the Dark. Probably not a healthy way to view the game and the meta, but whatever, it's fine. But Worm Cult probably need a little bit of help. We then go to Hearthkin. Hearthkin, the little stumpy boys, the short kings, I don't like them, aesthetically. I think GW missed the mark. They're not quite dwarfy enough for me. They're a little bit too human, modern astronaut-y, which is a bit of a shame. However, I will say I love the idea of a Book of Grudges. super awesome, because I'm a petty bitch, just like they are. However, I think they need more health. So, as mentioned before, they are a 10 model team. GW has yet to, apart from already discussed novitiates, GW has yet to put out a 10 model team that has 7 wounds that is viable in the game and hasn't yet received a buff. So I assume Hearthkin are also going to get buffed. Also, thematically, how on earth are dwarves not tougher than elves? They should be 9 wounds. There you go. Not just take them to 8, put them to 9. However, that's going to make getting grudges out harder. That's an issue. However, again, I'm going to say make them 9 health and can never count as injured. There you go. I think that should be Hearthkin. And then that'll be fine. They'd be very thematic. I still don't think they'd wreck face, but they'd be okay. And that's it. That's the bottom tier fixed. We now go to the top tier, and the only ones worth talking about are Felgor and Colts. Why are they the only ones worth talking about? That's because everything else has been out for ages, and GW doesn't seem to care that In Session, Legionary, Void Dancers, Gellerpox are all winning constantly and have really high, like, yeah, it's fine. Okay. So why should I waste my time? Now, of course, I've just done that for Wormcult and Warpcoven, but that's because I'm a man of the underdog. You know how it is. I got it. I got that dog in me, if you will. Felgor. Okay, we're only going to talk about Felgor and Cults. So Felgor, there's many ways to fix Frenzy. Personally, look, I don't mind that a team can be easy to play and top tier. Something has to be the best, right? Like, that's okay. There's always a top tier. Felgor can be the top tier. Fine. Personally, I only want to see the abuse of Frenzy fixed, not the ability itself. I've come around to the idea that actually Frenzy as a concept is fine, but the way that it can be abused is not fine, and that's what needs to be fixed. That's just my take. Some people might want to see them have health reduced, have Frenzy completely changed, etc, etc. However, just to clarify, a Frenzy essentially, the abuse of it is that when you die, not in your turn, you essentially get an extra turn, okay? To abuse this, you charge the enemy to tie them up and to make yourself safe, contest points, etc. But then you do not perform the fight action. This forces the enemy to fight you or fall back, either way losing them a turn, because you gain a turn if they fight you, even if they kill you. But you're guaranteed to put through like at least 4 damage on them, which will then put them into one-shot range in your next turn. And during that time, you are then invulnerable, which is insane. So simply add a line to Frenzy that whenever a Felgor is in engagement range of an enemy, it must perform the fight action, and it must be able to perform the fight action. That way you can't pass as your first action and then charge, and just say, oh, well, I can't perform it, you know, I don't have the AP, because that's what the abusive players would do. They would just pass, then charge. That's how they would get around the idea of you saying you must perform the fight action after charging. So you say they must be able to perform the fight action after a charge, and you must perform the fight action. Yeah, cool. It would still be a very strong team, still a really hard counter to many teams. As discussed, this wouldn't help them against Wormcult. Like, this wouldn't change that core factor. They would still be a top tier team with very great, you know, rock, paper, scissors matchups, but they wouldn't be broken. And this would just stop the win at all costs bullshit mentality players from abusing that, which I think is a bit cringe, but whatever. Those are the rules. You know, remove the ability to abuse a rule, and then consider nerfs is what I would say for Felgor. Finally, we have the Chaos Cults. So again, there are so many possible ways to fix this team. This is just what is Games Workshop going to do? I don't know, because there are so many options. So they might get real nitty gritty and say, okay, we really overstepped the bound with this team. We've got to make 10 changes to fix this. Or they might get real basic and just say, you know what? We accidentally released a 15 model on the board team. That's obviously too many. Let's just take models away. and make it an actual roster that you have to pick from. They might limit number of mutants, the number of torments you can put. Maybe you can only ever have 2 mutants and 1 torment, right? That would immediately balance the team. Are they going to do that? Don't know. Are they just going to lower the health on everything? Maybe cultists become 6 wounds. That'd be interesting. Maybe they're going to stop the health regen when you mutate. There's many options, many options. However, I think for a light touch, you want to drop the number of cultist models to 8. You can only have 8 on the board when you start. So you're just taking away 1 activation from them. So instead of being a total of 5 actions, plus then as GA 2 actions with cultists, and then 5 actions from the commune. You're going to 4 actions with cultists, 5 with the commune. You're still 9 activations, you're still doing just fine, but yeah. Beyond that, I think some sort of limiter on the mutations is probably a good idea. Personally, I like that the next model you mutate into comes back as that full model. I don't like the idea of... I think it would be too much of a nerf, and a nerf that then doesn't feel good, to go ahead and mutate a cultist that you've taken down to 1 wound remaining, to then mutate into a mutant with 1 wound remaining. I don't know. I guess you could say they get +3 wounds back or something, or D6. Nah, I don't like that. I don't like that. Too random, bit boring. Also, the number of ways you can mutate, there's probably too many. Like, 1 a turn, base, makes sense, but maybe that's the one you want to remove, because you kind of want to keep it on your leader, because your leader, it's then making that leader a little bit less powerful, because the leader has a lot of good things it can do, you know, a dash charge, etc. Like, you want to be using that leader, and it having to mutate a model, in a sense, is containing it, making it a bit of a nerf model. You have to spend that APL to mutate a model. If you don't do that, you don't mutate enough, etc. So if you were to remove it from the leader as an ability, you're kind of freeing up the leader to make it a more technical team with more funky things it can do, which is good as well. But if you're thinking about how to limit the number of models that can mutate, maybe leave it on the leader because you want to restrict that leader as a power piece. So maybe I wouldn't want to say remove it from the fight, right? So if you get a kill, you mutate. I think that's great. I think that should definitely stay. Even if that's the most broken part of mutating, that should stay because it's good, it's fun, it rewards good play. Or fun play. I'm thinking of fun here. So maybe you have to remove the average, what's the word, not generic, average, what? Native, every turn you get a mutate. Because that means that at the very least you have to play the game to mutate, and it's the mutate that makes the faction so strong. Also, you probably want to change what the banner guy does. There you go, that's it. Boom. Hey, if you made it to the end of the video, I'd like to give you a big triple hello. Wow, the wholesomeness knows no bounds in the worlds of Glass Half Dead and me, its host, Andy. Thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. Genuinely, small channel like mine, someone just getting back into Kill Team, getting hyped on it again after a few months of not liking the game at all, frankly. You know, being distracted by Shatterpoint, by 40k, two games I like and still like, but I'm now back into the idea of loving Kill Team. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Genuinely helps a small channel like mine, so genuinely. And if you like what I do here, if you want to support me getting back into Kill Team, all that great stuff, consider checking me out on Patreon, because very genuinely, and I mean this, cringe, I know, genuine emotion, cringe. But without my Patreon support, Glass Half Dead wouldn't be here anymore. It would have definitely stopped by now. So if you like what I do, you want the channel to be around, consider checking me out on Patreon. There you go. That's all I'll say. Thank you so much for watching. All next week. Stuff coming out every single day. It's shorts. I'm messing around with stuff. I'm doing little... That's why these are out here, actually. Because I was recording some quick things. Just to keep the channel ticking over as I take a little bit of a week off to center myself, to get zen with it. And then coming soon, a tier list. Yeah, because I'm hype. Why not? Thank you so much for watching, everybody, and stay shapedly hydrated.